The death toll in the DRC rises after a rebel group launches an attack. The militia leader is killed by the army, but many still blame the government and the international community for failing to keep civilians safe. I'm Imran Gata, and today's newsmaker is the crisis in the Democratic Republic of Congo. The DRC is a nation rich in resources, and yet many of its people live in poverty and fear. Rebel fighters from the Allied Democratic Forces have killed more than 1,000 civilians in recent years, and 60 people just in the last 2 weeks. It's the latest unrest in a nation that's been plagued with violence for decades. The United Nations has more than 18,000 troops stationed there. It's the world's largest peacekeeping mission with an annual budget of $1 billion. But these latest attacks have demonstrators demanding they get out. Last week, protesters stormed 2 UN compounds, fed up that peacekeepers had failed to keep them safe. The standoff that followed led to further casualties. As we go to air now, these anti-UN protests are continuing in the city of Beni. Meanwhile, the UN is investigating whether its forces played a role in the death of a young protester. But should they also be asking if their track record means it's time to go home? That debate in a moment. But first, Haider Abbasi has this report.
The UN mission in Congo has come under attack. This time not by armed groups, but civilians. Crowds stormed the base last week in the eastern city of Beni. They're angry that the peacekeepers failed to stop a massacre that killed 13 civilians there.
I am very happy because it now gives a good image compared to what the young people did yesterday. It reminds the world that the people of Beni are outraged by the presence of MONUSCO here in the city of Beni.
The Allied Democratic Forces are being blamed for the deaths. The ADF is just one of many militias active in Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo. Last month, the Congolese army launched an operation in the region to wipe out such groups. It seems the massacre in Beni is a response to the offensive. The people here have started taking matters into their own hands. On Sunday, a mob lynched 2 people suspected of being members of the ADF. The DRC's government rejects this and says the victims were officers in the military. But the people have had enough. They want the UN peacekeepers out and blame the military for not doing enough. The UN mission in Congo began in 1999. It's one of the largest peacekeeping missions in the world and is concentrated in the northeast. But in recent years, funding has been severely cut and the force has been overstretched. So is the UN failing Congo? And if so, is it time they left? Haider Abbasi, The Newsmakers.
To answer that, let's go to Vava Tampa. He's an activist and founder of Save the Congo, a campaign group working to bring peace to the region. Maurice Carney is the executive director of Friends of the Congo, an advocacy organization that raises awareness of the DRC's challenges. And David Otto is the counter-terrorism director at Global Risk International UK. Gentlemen, good to have you all on the program. Vava, horrible situation for the people of Beni, horrible situation for the people in North Kivu, and one could possibly say horrible for people in most of the east of the country for a long, long time. Is the UN a part of the problem?
Yes, the UN is part of the problem, but we need to be absolutely clear and not to scapegoat the UN. The key problem here is the international security, the international community, and to be more precise, the 5-member, permanent member of the UN Security Council. We need to remember that the UN forces in Congo can only be as powerful or as resilient or strong as the will or resilience of the 5 members of the UN Security Council. If those in charge refuse to act on issues of justice, issues of impunity, then clearly MONUSCO on the ground cannot do anymore. So the problem here clearly, and I'm one of those who is supportive of the protests of people in Beni and across the entire eastern part of Congo. But we need to be clear, the problem and the protest is actually against the international community for failing the Congolese people, for failing to stop Kabila, for failing to arrest Kabila, and to arrest many of his top lieutenants who remains in power and in control, not only in Congo, but also in Kigali and in Uganda.
Maurice Carney, when you hear that, do you say, hold on, Joseph Kabila can't be central to this because he's not in power anymore? Felix Tshisekedi is the president. Or do you agree with Vava that Kabila is still a part of it and that the UN has not been given the teeth that it needs and the mandate that it needs from powerful countries?
Well, the UN was given a mandate through the Force Intervention Brigade that rallied thousands of troops coming from Mali, Tanzania, and a number of other African countries that wound up ousting or playing a role in ousting the M23. Certainly that force can be further inserted in the case in Beni. However, I would put the onus primarily on the state. There's a state failure. The Congolese government has not exercised control over its territory. It has not demonstrated the kind of political leadership that we believe that is needed to prioritize the people of Beni. We saw it during the Kabila era, and I think we're seeing it now in the Tshisekedi era. In the Kabila era, we saw that during the elections, folks in Beni were left out, which was highly symbolic. They didn't even get a chance to vote. And that's an indication of the priority that's been, or lack thereof, that's been put on the people of Beni. So I think, one, Congolese government needs to show greater leadership. Two, Beni's a part of the Congo. That hasn't come through clearly. It hasn't been, the region hasn't been prioritized. So ultimately, whether the UN is there or the UN leaves, it's going to be up to the Congolese state in order to exercise authority over its territory, prioritize the people, clean up the military. The military has been compromised, infiltrated by neighboring militaries from neighboring countries. So there's a lot of house cleaning that needs to be done within the state itself. And I think that's where I would put the primary onus, not so much on the international community.
David Otto, a lot of people say, well, the UN has deep problems and the UN is a part of the problem. The Congolese forces are a part of the problem for the aforementioned reasons. But in trying to contextualize it, they also say you don't understand what they're dealing with and that these rebels are something else. Is that right? Demystify these rebels for me.
Of course, we are talking about the Allied Democratic Forces here. They originated from neighboring Uganda, where they, significantly caused a lot of havoc, not just within Uganda, but also, as we can see, in DRC. Principally, I think this is an organization that has now, been infiltrated, as recently as even before al-Baghdadi was killed as the ISIS leader. He did mention that they had created some kind of an ISIS in the Eastern African Republic, which we now know is based around the borders of DRC, Uganda, and somewhat in the Central African Republic. So this organization, this terrorist organization, has become much more sophisticated, and they are taking advantage of popular sentiments. Of course, as the aforementioned colleagues have said, there is a huge situation. The UN has been there for 20 years. Of course, any international organization that has been in a country for 20 years must be able to show that it deserves to be there for another day. So I think that the situation is such that the UN needs to reevaluate its position, not just in DRC, but in many countries that it has shown to be ineffective. But I think that the onus again remains with the international community to help the Congolese, to build their capacity that they can control their own political and economic situation. I think the UN now has to really think about that seriously in order for it to sustain its good name that it has created for some time.
Yeah, there was an interesting point made there. As if things weren't bad enough, there's possibly an injection of Daesh within this particular rebel group.
Yeah.
Vava Tampa,
Can I
okay,
speak to that a
sure.
little bit?
Maurice, come in. Yes, come in.
I think we have to really be careful about the narrative.
Right.
This is vital. There was an operation led in 2014 called Sokola 1 that dispersed the Allied Democratic Forces. When the leader, Jamal Mukulu, was arrested in 2015, it caused divisions. So you have 5 or 6 different so-called Allied Democratic Forces. You have ADF Mukulu, ADF Muleka, ADF Baluluku. So there are different groups. And in our narrative, it's really important that we speak about unidentified killers, because what is happening is that every assassination, every massacre is being attributed to the ADF, which may not necessarily be the case.
That's a good point.
And
that's really good.
And if we don't analyze the situation properly, then the solutions are not going to be enduring or lasting.
Yeah.
One of the strongest so-called ADF groups right now is a Kenya-Rwanda speaking group.
Right.
When you hear about Kenya-Rwanda speaking group, then you have to think of the Rwandan government. And we know structurally in the area for the past 20 years, what has happened is a successive invasions on the part of Rwanda of Uganda. There's successive backing of militia groups on the part of Rwanda and Uganda. So we cannot take that out of the equation.
And one of the things
of terrorizing local communities in order to displace them for land, that's something that came with the invasions of Rwanda and Uganda. So we definitely have to take that into consideration before we talk about an international terrorist operation.
And what we will do, Maurice, in a few minutes' time, we'll take a step back and look at some of the international influence on the conflict from the 90s to now and try to contextualize it and see if that's the root cause here. But bringing it back up to speed with right now, Vava, we wanted to get the UN as a part of this debate. They declined, but they gave us a statement. Have a little listen to this. They told us, we understand the anger and the frustration of parts of the population, but attacks on local authorities and UN peacekeepers are playing into the hands of the armed groups. There are a few people in the region who are living off this instability. The ADF and other armed groups deliberately attack civilians, mostly in remote areas and in the middle of the night, to create this instability and fear. We try to support the Congolese army where we can and where it is wanted, and we have been in discussions with the military leadership of the Congolese army in charge of the operations against the ADF, as well as with the government in Kinshasa and local authorities, who all expressed their willingness to work with us to identify areas for a better and more efficient cooperation against spoilers and armed groups. That was Matthias Gilman, a United Nations communications officer on behalf of UN Peacekeeping. Vava, you find that acceptable?
Look, I would understand why the UN would phrase their statement in those lines. But look, we need to conceptualize this issue. Look, the killings in Beni began exactly 1 year after MONUSCO and the Congolese army, led by Mamadou Ndala, defeated the M23 militia gangs, the latest Kigali-backed militia gangs in Congo. So it's no coincidence. The second element we need to keep in mind is that there is a UN report in 2016 co-written by Michael Sharp, the American who was killed in Kasai. Essentially, that report says that the man responsible organizing the killings in Beni is a Kabila ally. His name is General Akili Mundus, okay? And the third element to bear in mind, the current Congolese army general in charge of security in Beni and across the entire eastern region is a former deputy commander to both Bosco Ntaganda, who was convicted by the ICC recently, as well as German Tanganda, who was also convicted by the ICC. Again, that man, that guy is also incredibly close to Kabila. So clearly, and if you keep in mind that Kabila has been pushing for the UN to be out of Congo for the past 5 or 10 years, and Kagame in Rwanda, Paul Kagame in Rwanda, has been pushing the same agenda. So was Museveni. Clearly, it shows that they are causing the situation in Beni for the simplest reason, to frustrate the local population. I believe for two reasons. One, so the local population can push the UN out, and then Kabila would essentially be hands-free to do as he please. So would Kagame, so would Museveni, and so forth. So that's the first reason.
Okay.
And the second key element, I believe, so that essentially what would happen on the ground in Beni is a new militia gang would be created in the name, under the guise of defending the local people of Beni. And that would lead into more killings, more crises in that part of the country, and potentially all over Congo, and that would eventually lead to the breakup either of Beni itself or the entire eastern region. That has been, the balkanization of Congo has been on the agenda from day one.
Yeah, and a lot of us are hoping that it's not that cynical and that nefarious, Vava. That paints a really horrendous picture of terrible intentions from a lot of these power players. But you know what? We've been discussing what's happening in the DRC right now, but let's take a step back. Tragically, conflict is nothing new to the Congolese people. They live in one of the most dangerous countries on the planet. But not everyone knows why. A brutal civil war killed millions in what was the deadliest conflict since the Second World War, with a death toll higher than Iraq and Syria combined. As Haider Abbasi explains again, it's not the only hardship the DRC has faced.
Congo is rich in minerals, gold, copper, diamonds, and oil. This wealth has long attracted the attention of many armed groups and regional powers. Millions of people from neighboring Rwanda fled to Congo after the 1994 genocide, and with them came war. For decades, Rwanda and Uganda have supported rebel groups inside the DRC. They've been accused of using militias as a proxy to gain control of Congo's minerals. Millions were killed in the Congolese War, which officially ended in 2003, but armed groups continue to operate in the east. Government control of this region has always been weak, allowing militias to take shelter there. This encouraged the deployment of UN peacekeepers in the first place. Apart from the conflict, the DRC is also dealing with a deadly outbreak of Ebola. Since August last year, the virus has killed more than 2,000 people. The fighting against the rebels has disrupted health services. With such a violent past and with so many challenges, does the DRC have any hope of stability?
David Otto, when we look at it like that, with the lens of historical context, is it difficult to actually identify the root causes of what's going on in the East?
I don't think it's difficult to identify the root causes. Of course, the reason why Congo has been in such a situation of instability and, Ebola and, measles, wars, it's very simple because, it's a very rich country. It's one of the richest countries in the world, if not the richest. There are so many players, as it's been clearly stated. Neighboring countries are feeding off the mineral richness of DRC. They are taking advantage of the political instability, of the inability of the government to be able to control its territorial borders. Of course, Congo is not alone in terms of its porosity around its border countries. It's a situation which, of course, needs to be dealt with, not just by Congo itself, but I think principally by the African Union. That's what I expected the African Union to be doing, rather than some kind of subcontracting the issues of Africa to the United Nations. So I think it's terrible that DRC is going through this malaise. Other countries in Africa are going through the same. I think it's high time for African countries to realize that what is actually keeping them unstable is their richness, and I think they must come together in some way to look at these issues from varying factions.
Right. I want to bring in Vava here because Vava, we've had this conversation before when Bosco Ntaganda was sentenced. Right. The question was, how much of an impact will this international justice have on the situation on the ground? If we look at it now and we look at what's happening on the ground, it's seemingly nothing. Why is that? Is it because only the small fry are facing justice in the international community?
That is one of the central elements, one of the reasons people in Beni continue to protest, one of the reasons people across Congo continue to call on the international community to do more. Look, justice is the problem, and peace begins with justice. And the one thing which has been denied to the Congolese people by the international community is justice. What it's quite clear is the Congolese government would not do any justice. Okay, that is quite clear. Kabila has the power. As we stand, as we speak, Congo has 3 presidents. One who was elected, Martin Fayulu, he has no power. Felix Tshisekedi, who was appointed by Kabila in power but doesn't have any power. And Kabila, who gave up power but retained all the power. And Kabila would not allow any justice, because if there is any justice in Congo, Kabila himself, as well as Kagame, as well as Museveni in Uganda, would end up at the ICC or in some sort of Congolese prison. That is quite clear. So until we have what we've been calling for is the establishment of an international criminal tribunal for Congo in Congo, with both Congolese and international experts to deal with issues of impunity, nothing is going to change. Right. And I need to correct one thing. We need to be quite clear. It's not that Congo has minerals that is causing the problems. That's not the issue. The issue here has always been because the US, the British, the French, the Belgium, and so forth have made it their form of policy to continue to destabilize Congo, whether it's by killing Patrice Lumumba, whether it's by essentially supporting Mobutu for 32 years of the 20th century to be in power, or whether it's by essentially giving Kabila freedom to do as he please. And when the Congolese people elected Martin Fayulu, the entire international community closed their eyes and allowed Kabila to make a deal with Felix Tshisekedi. Those are the key problems. The issue here is the international community, and the problem, the reason people are protesting is protesting against all of those things, against the international community in Beni.
Okay, and to pick up on one of those things that, Maurice, you complained about, was that there's no spotlight on Paul Kagame or Rwanda or their historical role on the east of the country. The international community is not going to touch Rwanda or ask any questions of Rwanda because it's a success story. So why bother?
Yeah, a success story. It's a successful marketing campaign. The Rwandan people live under a repressive regime with a leader that sends out death squads throughout the world to assassinate and kill dissidents. It's a country, I mean, the facts speak for themselves. It's only in an authoritarian country that you can have somebody win an election with 99% of the votes. So I agree with Vava as it relates to questions of accountability, question of impunity, question of lack of justice. The international community is complicit, because even when you have a situation where international institutions like the International Court of Justice, for example, who ruled against Uganda and say Uganda owes $10 billion in reparations to the Congo, you find the United States, you find Britain, other countries giving a pass to people like Museveni and people like Kagame. In fact, they provide political and diplomatic cover at the international level for the crimes that are committed by these leaders. However, I don't want to take the focus off the Congolese people in the sense that the political class across the board, not just Kabila, is bankrupt. That's what I would say. And so the people, the Congolese people who have organized to resist, whether locally in Beni or whether, as we saw in the elections, where they turned out to vote Kabila's successor.
When you say bankrupt, you mean
office.
Morally bankrupt or out of cash?
Well, they are short on cash as well because they pocket a lot of the state resources, but showing lack of leadership as it relates to leadership, as it relates to acting in the interests of the Congolese people as a whole, as opposed to acting in the interests of international finance capital or multinational corporations. And we see that it is a leadership that is concerned primarily about their own personal interests and not concerned about the population at large. Dr. Denis Mukwege, the Nobel Peace Prize laureate from 2018, said the leadership just doesn't care about the Congolese people, doesn't love the Congolese people. So there needs to be a wholesale cleaning of house of the political leadership. It needs to be a stronger support for the people. The Congolese people were betrayed in the last elections. They're the ones who organized to force Kabila to hold elections. They're the ones who organized to vote against Kabila's successor. However, the African Union, the international community, betrayed the Congolese people and the choices that they made, which has left the Kabila and his Common Front for the Congo the most powerful political force in the country. And you have a weak presidency in Tshisekedi, who during the election campaign period said that he was going to camp out in Beni until peace comes, and we haven't seen that. He has traveled the world. Ostensibly to raise money for investment in the Congo, but here it is that we see Congolese people are suffering in Beni. There is no investment that's going to come if there is insecurity. If Beni is not secure, Congo is not secure, and if the leadership were to take that stance, I think that would go a long way towards leading towards solutions.
Okay, gentlemen, I've got to wrap, but it's worth noting that Congo's facing multiple crises. Of course, Ebola, 2,000 people have been killed. The UN has evacuated Beni and, broadly speaking, in North Kivu. They've not left the country, they've gone to Goma, but when UNICEF and the World Health Organization evacuate, the situation's not great. Vava, Maurice and David, it's been a pleasure talking to all of you. I thank you very much for joining us. Thank you for watching. We will see you next time. Bye-bye.